This is one of my favorite lessons. I wish we could do it in person, but we can't. And it's about radians. Radians is an alternative way to measure angles. And we're going to get into that in a minute, but remember, we're used to measuring a rotation around a circle in degrees, 360 degrees. And that 360 number, as we've discussed in class, it's an arbitrary number that humans just made up because we live on a planet that's about 365 days in a year. It's close to 360. So we came up with that number. Radians would work on any planet. It's a way to measure the angle of a circle, the rotation defined by some arc that with the arc length is exactly the same as one radii, or one radius rather. So I'm going to kind of demonstrate that, and let's think about what that means here. So I have a circle here with a radius of 5 units, and before I started filming, I made a piece of string, and I marked off 4 radii. So everywhere there's a marking is a radius. And I wanted to, instead of thinking about, well, this is 90 degrees, and this is 180 degrees, and 270 and 360 degrees, again, those are numbers that we just kind of made up as humans. Why isn't that 100? Wouldn't it be nicer? But it's not. But let's look at what it looks like with a radian instead. So what I'm going to do then is I'm going to take this, and I'm going to lay it on the edge of the circle. So that length there is the same as 1 radius, only I've curved it so that it's along the edge of the circle. And you can see that, well, that's 1 radian. That angle, I don't know how many degrees it is off the top of my head, but it's 1 radian, which we abbreviate as a rad. Okay, so then let's look at the next one. See, here is 2 radians is right here. And if I keep going around, here is 3 radians. Okay, so if you stop and think about that, here's 2 radians, here's 3 radians. If I asked you what was 180 degrees, you might say, well, it's just a little bit more than 3 radians. You think about that for a second. Because remember that the circumference is, the circumference is pi times the diameter, which of course would be pi times 2 radii. Okay, but a radian is just the radii. Well, how many degrees, or I'm sorry, how many radians does it look like there are in 180 degrees? 3 plus a little bit more. What do you think that little bit more is? I'd say that's approximately 1, 4, 1, 5, 9, 2, 6, 5, 3, 5, 8, 8, 9, 7, 9, so on. Yeah, it turns out that it's pi radians in 180 degrees. Pi radians is equal to 180 degrees. So we almost always talk about radians in terms of pi. Very important thing to know. And in fact, that if pi radians is 180 degrees, then an entire rotation around the circle is 2 pi radians, or 360 degrees. The other thing I wanted to do in this video, besides explain what a radian is, and show you how it works out, that it's exactly pi radians around the circle, is I want to be able to convert between the two. And the first thing I want to show you is how do you convert from a certain number of degrees, like 90 or 315, and figure out how many radians that is. And I'm going to start with the idea that it's pi radians in 180 degrees. And since I want to know degrees, I want to know, well, how many radians are there in 1 degree? And I can just divide by 180. It turns out that then 1 degree is equal to pi over 180 radians. Okay, so that's what we think of as the conversion factor. If I want to know how many radians there are in 90 degrees, there's 90 of these. There's 90 pi over 180s. So what we do is we just take the degree that we want to know, and we multiply it by the conversion factor, pi over 180. And then we would just reduce the fraction. These zeros cancel, and 9 over 18 reduces to 1 over 2. So 90 degrees is equal to pi over 2 radians. And remember that 180 degrees is pi radians. Well, 90 is half of 180. So 180 degrees is half of half of pi radians. It's 90 is half of pi radians. What about 315? Same thing, let's multiply that by pi over 180. And then I just need to reduce this fraction here. I think 315 divides by 15 and you get 21. And 180 divides by 15 and you get 12. And I think it can keep reducing because 21 can divide by 3 and get 7. 12 can divide by 3 and get 4. So it turns out it's 7 over 4 times pi. It's 7/4 of a pi. All right, so now quickly, I want to go the other way. And remember, if pi radians is 180 degrees, well, then what's 1 radian? 1 radian would be 180 divided by pi, right? So 1 radian is 180 divided by pi. So guess what we're going to do? We're going to multiply this by 180 divided by pi. So this is 5/6 of a pi. It's really just 5 pi over 6 is 5/6 of 180 degrees. When I do this multiplication, the cool thing is the degree, or the pi's cancel. And then I can just think, well, 18 divided by 6 is 3, so 5 times 3, so it's 150 degrees. 5 pi over 6 is 150 degrees. Let's multiply it. Let's figure out what's 4 pi over 3. It's 4/3 of a pi, 4/3 of 180 degrees. I'll multiply by 180 over pi, and these pi's cancel. 18 divided by 3 is 6, so it's 240 degrees. Practice converting between radians and degrees.